when you're growing up, sometimes it's really hard, right? Sometimes you doubt yourself, sometimes you lack confidence, but there's always a fire in you. And I think the biggest thing that everyone's always going to fail. And I think if you're not trying, or if you're not failing, then you're not pushing yourself hard enough.
Honestly, just focusing on us. I thought defensively we had some slippages early on, and that got them some easy buckets at the rim. Their second chance points, that was pretty big for us, their rebounding, and so.
I think it affects emotionally because nobody wants to see a teammate go down like that. But also, on the floor, that's another point guard, a primary ball handler.
Caitlin Clark didn't play, but still walked off looking furious, and she had every reason. The Fever's defense, non-existent. Sophie Cunningham dropped 18 in 26 minutes, yet the other side had multiple players putting up box score nights like all-stars. The question hanging over the WNBA right now, is this a one-game collapse, or is Indiana about to unravel completely without Clark leading the floor? Let's break down why her glare from the bench might be the biggest warning sign yet. Before we move on, I would like you to subscribe to the channel and like the video. How bad was it? Let's just say, everyone on Phoenix's roster looked like a star that night. It didn't matter if it was a starter, a bench player, or someone who usually just spaces the floor. When they touched the ball, it felt like an automatic bucket. The Mercury didn't have to work hard to get open looks, because Indiana handed them lanes so wide you could drive through without seeing traffic.
For sure. I mean, it sucks, right? You don't ever want to see anyone be injured on any team. I feel like there's been a lot of injuries this year in the W, harsh ones, I think.
Someone who is a big part of our rotation on both ends of the floor. And so you go down one guard and it puts more pressure on Kelsey and Sophie and Lexi. I mean, we talk about it. Like, you talk about it. Just staying together. Just worrying about our execution, worrying about us continuing to get better. Look, there are going to be days where we don't make shots. There are going to be days where you feel like you're stuck in mud.
Right from the jump, Phoenix saw the soft spots. Simple pick and rolls turned into clean drives to the rim because the Fever couldn't decide who was switching and who was helping. One on-ball screen and the defense would freeze, leaving two Indiana defenders chasing the same player while another Mercury scorer slipped behind them all alone. The closeouts weren't just late, they were almost non-existent. When you give a shooter that much time to set their feet, you're asking to get lit up. It got so bad there were sequences where it literally looked like a no-contact scrimmage.
It's about the bigger picture of how we respond to that. And this group was still tight in our huddles. This group was still engaged in timeouts. This group was still, going out and executing on both ends.
For me, I think when you put in the work and you're the hardest worker, sometimes it's ugly, right? But you just have to kind of stack the days. And I just think if you keep showing up and you keep working hard, good things are going to happen.
I think when you look at the grand scheme of things, a lot of things that we can clean up. And so for us, making sure that we go back, we look at that film and be ready to clean that up.
Midway through the second quarter, you could see Indiana's guards expecting help at the rim, but the post players were stuck watching the ball instead of rotating. Result, wide open layups. And these weren't Diana Taurasi type killers doing the damage. Role players were finding themselves unguarded under the basket. There's nothing more demoralizing than giving up career nights to players who normally finish with single digits. Phoenix shot well over 50% from the field, and a big chunk of that came without a single hand in their face. You don't need advanced analytics to see the problem. Too many possessions ended with the Mercury getting 3 or 4 passes in before hitting a wide open jumper. That's not great offense, that's bad defense. And sure, Sophie Cunningham gave the Fever an offensive boost. She was efficient, she was aggressive, and she knocked down shots that kept Indiana from falling into an early hole. But when every bucket you score on one end gets answered twice as quickly on the other, the momentum just drains away. Cunningham's efforts were like throwing water on a wildfire. There just wasn't enough to stop it from spreading. Clark wasn't pacing or looking bored on the bench. She was locked in, watching every cut, every late help, every time a rebound bounced right back to a Mercury player because no one put a body on them. You could almost see her tracking the mental tally of mistakes piling up. And that's important because when a player like Clark reacts that strongly, it's not about 1 or 2 blown plays. It's about a pattern that other teams will happily exploit once they know Indiana's rotations can be broken that easily. The whole league watches these games. Opponents see when you can't contain the paint or when your closeouts are slow. Phoenix didn't just win, they sent a signal that if you move the ball side to side against Indiana right now, you're going to get good looks all night. That's a dangerous reputation to have, especially without your star floor general out there directing traffic. And here's the kicker. When the leaked footage of Clark's reaction started making the rounds, you could match her visible frustration to specific moments late in the fourth quarter. A blown switch on the wing that ended in a corner three, a failed box out that gifted Phoenix a second chance bucket. Those weren't isolated mistakes. They were the same slip-ups that had been happening all game, which makes you wonder how much of this is on the strategy being used and how much is simply not executing the plan. Sometimes it's not just the players, it's who's pulling the strings. When Clark isn't on the court, every coaching move gets magnified, and in this game, a lot of those moves had fans shaking their heads. Rotations that made sense on paper ended up looking like open invites for Phoenix to keep scoring at will, and when the lineup combinations clearly weren't working, there wasn't much urgency to change them. You could feel the frustration building in the stands when certain defensive anchors stayed glued to the bench while the Fever got sliced apart inside. Everyone knew Phoenix was attacking the same spots over and over, but instead of throwing in a stopper to plug the leak, Indiana kept rolling with the same group that had just given up a run. At one point in the third quarter, a stretch of barely 4 minutes saw the Mercury pile on 10 unanswered points, and two of the Fever's best on-ball defenders didn't even check in until the damage was done. Fans haven't forgotten about earlier games either. There's been talk that some rotation patterns look more like chasing individual stat lines than locking in on what the matchup needs. That's the kind of thing that can burn trust between the locker room, the coaching staff, and the people watching from the seats. In the Mercury game, it came to a head because the obvious adjustment, putting the best wing defender on the Phoenix scorer who couldn't miss, never happened. And every time that player touched the ball, the result was the same: bucket. You also have to factor in the roster's current health. Injuries forced Indiana to get creative, but that meant relying on smaller guards to try and contain taller, faster wings, or slower forwards to chase shooters around screens. It's a tough spot, but the schemes didn't seem to account for those mismatches. Instead of simplifying things and focusing on staying in front of the ball, the Fever kept running rotations that had players scrambling 2 passes behind the play. Some analysts have wondered if the defensive concepts Indiana runs are just too ambitious for this group right now. Is it a system that requires more switching and rotation speed than this roster can give? Or is it so loose that everyone is guessing instead of reacting with certainty? Whatever the case, in this game, it felt like players and coaches weren't on the same page about what adjustment really meant in real time. And this wasn't just a quiet post-game discussion point. You could actually hear the crowd at Gainbridge calling for changes in the middle of play, shouts to sub in specific players, groans when the same mismatched lineup stayed out there during another Phoenix run. It was all part of the atmosphere. That kind of in-game reaction is rare, and it shows just how obvious some of these decisions looked from outside the huddle. The bigger problem is that when the coaching decisions get this much heat, it feeds the narrative that the Fever can't keep their heads above water without Clark running the floor, if the rotations can't stabilize a game when she's out, and if adjustments can't slow down a hot hand on the other team, the issues go way beyond a missing star. It's about whether Indiana can structure a game plan that holds up even when the lineup gets thrown off. And if that answer is no, you have to start asking, without Clark directing traffic out there, can this team even stay competitive for 4 quarters?